So good afternoon, everybody. You are all really welcome to this, the Women for Election event to launch our new research report entitled More Women, Changing the Face of Politics. We're really pleased you've joined us for the event. This is the culmination of a research report that's been running now for some months, interrupted somewhat by COVID, but really delighted to get the report out today. My name is Alison Cowzer and I am the chair of Women for Election. And really, I'm going to start off the proceedings by thanking all those who've been involved in putting this report together. Firstly, to thank Minister Peter Burke of the Department of Local Government and his whole department really for really putting their shoulder to the wheel with us on this, for funding the research and for being with us every step of the way. They've been huge supporters of our work and we hope that continues, and thank you very much, Minister. I'd also like to thank the team who put the research together, Dr. Fiona Buckley and Dr. Lisa Keenan, to our previous CEO, Caitriona Gleeson, who was involved in commissioning the research and has worked with us throughout the process, and to our current CEO, Caitriona Gleeson, who's only with us in the last 3 months now and has well and truly got her feet under the table. And of course to Cllr Hayes, who keeps the show on the road in everything to do with Women for Election. I'd particularly like to thank the participants who participated in the research, who gave their time, their insights and their experiences of what it's actually like to run for election in this country and to be elected, and who have shone a light on what could be perceived by many to be an opaque world, that world of running for election. But by sharing their experiences, I think they will be of huge benefit to the many women that we encounter on a daily basis at Women for Election who are considering a run for election, and for others who perhaps can influence how our electoral system and process is put together and the culture that actually informs that process. So really looking forward to hearing from our speakers today. Our running order, we're going to be joined now by Caitriona Gleeson, our CEO, followed by Minister Peter Burke, and then we're going to hear some of the key findings and recommendations from Dr. Fiona Buckley. And then we're going to be brought into a panel discussion, which is with 4 women who have actually run for election and some who have succeeded and become public representatives. I'm really looking forward to hearing that voice and their voices, giving us, I suppose, the real voice of what's behind the research. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to our CEO, Caitriona Gleeson.
Thank you, Alison. In the words of the great late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. In Ireland in 2020, the stark reality, however, is that women are missing from 40% of key cabinet subcommittees, including health and COVID and Ireland's engagement in Europe. In effect, what this means is that women are absent when decisions about our lives, our homes, our families, our communities, and our work are being made. Ireland is currently ranked 101st in the world rankings of female representation in national government. With only 1 in every 5 TDs and 1 in every 4 local councillors being women, we urgently need to drive solutions to tip the scales towards balanced and diverse representation in Irish politics. While Ireland elected Europe's first ever cabinet minister in 1918, over 100 years since Countess Markievicz broke new ground for women, we have lagged dismally behind other countries globally. In 2021, this includes countries such as China and Afghanistan, which shocked me when I discovered this fact. This is a significant tarnish on our emerging international reputation as a progressive and inclusive society. Last year's general election was the first time that there was a woman nominated on the ballot papers in every constituency in Ireland. While the introduction of the quotas in 2014 and the work of Women for Election and others are factors which led to more women being elected more than ever before in 2016, the general election in 2020 was a disappointing and shocking standstill, with only 36 women now elected to the Dáil. What is also stark is that in less than 2 years since the first Black woman councillor was elected to local government in Ireland, that Ireland has never elected an Irish Traveller woman to the Dáil or local government. The simple fact is we need a lot more women, and we need to help ensure that the women who run in the next elections come from a diversity of backgrounds, but most importantly from populations who've been most marginalised in Ireland. When I asked my 5-year-old daughter early this morning when I was asked by my 5-year-old daughter early this morning, why am I working to get more women elected? I asked her how she would feel if it was only the boys in her class that got to pick out the games they would all play together or the books they would read at story time. I leave the expression on her face to your imagination, but be assured she didn't delay in her declaration that this was so unfair. However, it's not just about fairness and equality. Diversity leads to better decisions and better governance. A 50-50 gender balance in government is key to Ireland becoming a thriving, sustainable and vibrant society. Be the change you want to see in the world reflects the motivation of so many women who run for election in Irish politics. As a non-partisan organisation, we have a proud record of working with women from all parties and none, and we are proactively promoting inclusion and diversity and very clear that there is no place for discrimination, particularly racism, in Irish politics. As we approach our 10th birthday, Women for Election, with our many supporters, continue to build momentum for a national movement to get more women to enter and succeed in political office. We are driving strategies to inspire the changes that are needed to achieve equal representation. However, training and support on its own will not bring about the fundamental change that is needed to see a balanced political system. Our new report highlights some of the changes that need to happen. We know the importance of the wider team that Ireland needs to make this 50-50 a reality and not just an aspiration. This team has to include political parties doing even more. Incumbent or emerging male candidates needing to consider how they can create space for more women, particularly in winnable seats. The quotas cannot be a target. They should be treated as minimum standards, and quotas also need to be introduced for local government and challenge elections. This team needs everyone, family, friends, community, to identify women whom they think have an interest or should consider running for election. Our research report should help inspire them. The overriding message from women we heard from was, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Our Igniter training programs are working to inform, inspire and equip women to get ready for the next general election and local elections. And we of course need more resources so that we can support the critical mass of female candidates needed to ensure that at least 30% of women are elected in the next elections. If you know anyone who you think should run, as a first step, perhaps suggest they sign up to one of our programs. However, gender barriers impacting women both entering and succeeding in politics continue to persist. In 2009, Senator Buckley and Professor Yvonne Galligan identified the 5 C's, which were core barriers to women's participation in politics. Dr. Fiona Buckley will be speaking to these in her presentation later. But it's frustrating to see that with the exception of quotas and an increasing number of candidates, we haven't reduced these barriers. In fact, it is likely that the list has grown longer and we have an increasing understanding of the barriers faced by more marginalised women. We're working with a range of stakeholders in 2021 to review the 5 C's and identify the key actions that are needed to help achieve a minimum of 30% by 2025. However, the stark reality is that there is no maternity provision for elected representatives in 2021. And this is a symptom of a political system that was designed by men for men and that has failed to change culture to create a level playing pitch. We commend Minister McEntee's leadership with her intention to take paid maternity leave, which will force mechanisms to be put in place later this summer. However, this should not be left to individual women who are expectant mothers. This should have been sorted out a long time ago, and it will not change the reality for local councillors who are required by law to attend meetings or lose their seat. Nor can we guarantee that the precedent will be sustained. We urge the government to amend the Local Government Act to address this anomaly. And in addition, as soon as it is safe to do so, if proxy voting cannot be legislated for because of a constitutional bar, then a referendum is also needed. The prevalence of abuse against women in both the private and public sphere is also a systemic and increasing barrier. Access to technology is vital for all of us to be connected in the world, especially now, and social media is an established important platform for candidates and politicians to communicate. The disproportionate and vile attacks on women, and in particular women from an ethnic minority or migrant background, online and offline, needs to be tackled head on. We cannot stand by and just watch or condone this hourly occurrence. There needs to be a multifaceted approach which sanctions and prevents this damaging and offensive behaviour. I'm delighted to be leading Women for Election to drive an important strategy with our very strong and committed board, our staff team, our many supporters and collaborators. And over the next 5 years, we will scale up the number of women who are participating in training, the mentoring programs to support women to run, and work with political parties to support their strategies to get more women on the ballot paper. We'll be increasing further our national engagement and collaboration across communities and networks to help create the conditions locally to support women to enter and succeed in politics. Naturally, we need resources and more of them. And of course, this means cash, But we also need everyone who wants to help create a thriving, vibrant and sustainable Ireland to join with us and to use your influence and your skills to help ensure that at least 30% of elected representatives in 2025 are women. Thank you. You're on silent there, Alison.
That dreaded phrase, you're on mute. Thank you very much, Caitriona. Thank you for, I suppose, setting out the stall of Women for Election, our mission, what we're here for, and what we're hoping to achieve. And as I say, great to have you on board. So I'd like now to introduce our Minister, Minister Peter Burke. Mr. Burke has been in the seat really only since the middle of last year, and I think what he's brought certainly to our area and our area of interest is huge commitment to tackling the issues that are in place and the obstacles that are there for women getting involved and running for politics. He's been extremely supportive, as has his department and his department officials in supporting our work, and we're extremely grateful for that. So I'd like to introduce Minister Peter Burke.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison, and thank everyone for the opportunity to be with you here this afternoon. First of all, I just commend everyone on their work to date and on the report. And as we see now, International Women's Day is gathering momentum, but as we all know, it shouldn't be about just one day. I think that's key, that it must be a continuous effort to make improvements, and particularly in terms of the area of our interest in terms of achieving greater gender balance in local government, which is so important to me and the work that I do. My department has worked with Women for Election for a number of years now, supporting the huge amount of valuable work that you do. And today I take this opportunity to convey our appreciation for your ongoing effort in working towards our shared objective by encouraging and preparing more women to enter local government. I commend you for your varied services that you offer, from creating awareness of our local structure to training and mentoring programs to establishing valuable networks for women to avail of when considering to enter politics. This support framework you are building has encouraged many women to have the confidence to enter the world of local politics. And for the women that have succeeded, you continue to offer them supports and engagement, which is so important. The research you have commissioned is most welcome at this time. This piece will be invaluable in setting out the roadmap of actions towards the local elections in 2024. While it may seem a while off yet, we need to set our strategies in place. What do we need to do in 2021, 3 years out from our local elections? What needs to be done in 2022, in 2023, and so on? This piece of research will be important in informing policy decisions going forward. I'm very pleased to say that the work is a priority of government and my department, and there is a good deal of work ongoing in relation to this in the department. The National Women's Council of Ireland received funding from my department to research and development of local and regional caucuses for women councillors, identifying interest and examining people's supports. This research will be launched on Thursday, along with guidelines to assist with the establishment of caucuses throughout the country. And I absolutely know that local authority executives will work with female elected members to ensure newly formed caucuses are successful. Longford Women's Link also received funding and supports from my department, and they continue the valuable work of the Cllr elective programme, training, supports and engagement with political parties. For the last 2 years, we have issued a very successful call for funding to local authorities to support initiatives that promote and increase gender balance in local government. There has been a great interest, and we have received numerous and varied applications this year. This demonstrates the interest within local authorities in this area, and we will continue with another call for funding later this year. There is also annual funding for a scheme to incentivise political parties to increase the proportion of women candidates, which was introduced in advance of the 2019 local elections on International Women's Day of that year. This incentive scheme formed part of a range of measures to promote increased participation by women in the 2019 local elections and to address barriers to participation highlighted during consultations with key stakeholders at that time. The scheme is open to all political parties on the Register of Political Parties on an opt-in basis. 2 years later, we now feel it is time to review this scheme, and our officials have been engaging with political parties to doing this, and on what basis. I would hope that the review will be finalised shortly and the details of a revised funding scheme will be issued soon after that. So what is the role of everyone involved, the political parties, for instance? Political parties have a vital role to play in ensuring gender balance. They need to select candidates that are respective and of our diverse society. And obviously, as I always say, that a council chamber or a Dáil should be a reflection of society at large. They need to actively coach, mentor, and support potential candidates, ensuring that they are sufficiently prepared and feel confident to be selected and ultimately be successful in their campaign. I note one of the findings of the research was that candidate recruitment and selection was not always clear and transparent. I am agreed that women need to know that they can be selected and valued as part of a party based on their own merit. There is no doubt that there has to be continued action on the part of government to improve gender balance in local government. Since I have come into office, I have met with Women for Election and other groups such as the National Women's Council of Ireland and Longford Women's Link to reiterate to them my absolute commitment to increasing female participation in local government and supporting them in their key and valuable work for our society. Issues such as maternity leave, appropriate remuneration and non-financial supports are essential to support, sustain and retain women councillors. I recently approved the establishment of a working group consisting of local government stakeholders, including councillors and local authority representatives, to draw up an action plan for the implementation of other non-pay recommendations as set out in the Moorhead report. The objective of this working group is to examine these recommendations and explore options to allow for their implementation at the earliest opportunity. The working group convened in early February, which proposed a completion date for the action plan by early Q2 this year. And I addressed the opening meeting and obviously put forward our key concern that we want this work carried out speedily and provide real alternatives for all involved. Addressing non-pay issues such as executive supports, examining possible efficiencies in terms of meetings, training supports and technological developments will provide for a more sustainable councillor role, thus facilitating the retention of existing women councillors, while also maximising the accessibility of local government to future female councillors. Through my engagement with various organisations and more generally throughout conversations with elected members, one of the outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the flexibility and possibility to attend remote meetings. Who would have thought that a year ago this would be the normality? However, it has worked to benefit many elected members. Women for Election has already indicated increased interest and attendance at their virtual online events because of the easy access to them. Such developments can help make local government more accessible for others and should be continued as it provides benefits. As we are all aware, paid maternity leave for elected representatives is an important topic continually and currently being discussed nationwide. There is an appetite at present to investigate this, and I have directed my officials from the department to liaise with their counterparts in the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth Affairs to explore this matter further. The terms of reference for the working group, which I previously mentioned, will also include an examination of paternity and maternity leave. We must be open to changing the Local Government Act to reflect this, as it is the right thing to do. I believe the role for women themselves cannot be underestimated. And as I said, this is part of the working group. And one point I would just add is I want it to be a real option for women. Sometimes when we hear mentioned proxy voting and items like that, that doesn't mean you're on leave. You still have to vote in an option like that. So I think what we really need here is an option that women can use and will use, rather than just saying we've changed a regulation and now women can have maternity leave when it may not be accessible or may not meet their needs. Previous research has shown that women are the backbone of our communities, working hard on a voluntary basis in community groups such as schools, sports and various committees. We need to instill confidence in these pillars of community and to see that it can make a real impact by taking the next step into local government, which is so important in terms of the decision making in our local society. Organisations such as Women for Election are invaluable to building up candidates, mentoring them, training them and preparing them for the road ahead. I look forward to continuing our future fruitful relationship with Women for Election, which I intend to continue in the build up to the 2024 local elections. Women for Election have a pivotal role in helping us increase the number of potential female candidates in the next general election and indeed beyond. As I have said, research is invaluable to inform us in these decisions and the actions to increase gender balance in local government. And that's why this report is so important, to frame the experiences of others that we can now learn from them. I thank everyone involved, from Dr. Fiona Buckley and Dr. Lisa Keenan, for undertaking this comprehensive piece of research, the 15 women who participated in the research, giving up their time and providing a hugely valuable insight, and Caitriona Gleeson, our CEO and staff and board of Women for Election, and the former CEO for all their work in this regard. I also wish and thank you for your endeavours, and I look forward to working very closely with everyone. And as I pointed out before, my door is always open in terms of ideas and avenues that we can progress together. And hopefully over our term in the Custom House, we will be able to turn around and say, we've worked very well with you, we've made key reforms, they're usable, they're accessible, and women will have benefited from that term. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Minister. And it really is heartening to hear that level of support for the work that we're doing on behalf of the women of Ireland who want to run and who need that support. Particularly keen to hear more about that working group, and just to let you know that at Women for Election, we would be very happy to collaborate, work with, present to whatever is required in terms of engaging with that group, so that I suppose we can be part of the solution, and that's ultimately what we're hoping to do. Also very heartened to hear about the pace and urgency with which you're addressing this issue. Every day we seem to come up with new findings, I suppose, even in our daily lives, and in what we hear in the media and in the realities of women's lives and the obstacles that they see in terms of getting elected. So really pleased to see that you're acting and with pace and urgency on all of these issues, and with a timetable. And that is really good to hear that there's a timetable in place that will bring us hopefully to a more fruitful 2024 local election campaign that will see many more women running and many more women succeeding and being elected. So again, thank you, Minister, for all that support, for your kind words. And I know you have the report on your desk. I know you have it in front of you. So we're looking forward to seeing as many as possible of our recommendations being implemented as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. So we're going to come on now to the meat of the report. As we've heard, Dr. Fiona Buckley and Dr. Lisa Keenan both worked on this report, putting it together. It was commissioned some time ago now, but COVID, of course, got in the way of many of our deliberations. But really pleased that we have managed to put together a report that really, from the length and breadth of Ireland, gives those voices, amplifies those voices from the women who have run. Delighted that Dr. Fiona Buckley has worked with us on this. She is a researcher and an academic of world renown, I would say, in this area. She's published both from this country and internationally. And she's currently with the Department of Government and Politics in UCC. And as I say, she's taken a very robust yet very practical approach to this research that allows us to hear those real voices of real women. So I'm going to hand over to you, Fiona, now.
Thank you very much, Alison, and thank you indeed to the Minister and to Caitriona. And before I start, I also want to reiterate what the Minister said there, and thanks to the women who participated in this study, who shared their experiences with us. So I have a PowerPoint here that hopefully, if we get this up and running, share the screen, and I'll start it. So you should be seeing the opening slide there. So as Alison said, my name is Fiona Buckley and I'm a lecturer based in the Department of Government and Politics in UCC, where I teach and research about women in Irish politics. Together with Dr. Lisa Keenan of the Department of Political Science in Trinity College Dublin, we were asked by Women for Election in actually December of 2019 to conduct research to capture women's experiences of running for election in Ireland, to highlight, I suppose, both the positive and challenging experiences of contesting an election. So between the jigs and the reels, there was a general election obviously called in January of 2020 that pushed a delay on things, and then COVID happened. But eventually we got underway with this research in, I suppose, April, May of last year. And from May through to, I suppose, August, we conducted interviews with women participants. So we interviewed women who contested the 2019 local and European elections and the 2020 general election to get a sense of what enables those women who do run to run. A variety of experiences were captured, from seeking a party nomination to running for election to getting elected. And the research involved interviewing a sample set of women who were mostly first-time candidates at these elections. While we can't draw conclusions that are representative of every woman's experience, we can identify certain patterns. Drawing from this research, but also with reference to research conducted by others, we will present an insight into what it is like to be a woman running for election in Ireland today. And we hope that this report will encourage more women to run for election in future. So I suppose from the outset, while a vast section of the population is eligible to run for political office, only a small cohort do. And of those who do run, men outnumber women. And so, for example, at last year's general election, 519 people put themselves forward for election, 162 women and 357 men. Historical, sociocultural and sociostructural reasons explain this difference, with many researchers, including a 2009 Oireachtas report entitled Women's Participation in Politics, more usually referred to as the Bacik report, refers to the 5 C's of cash, care, competence, culture and candidate selection to describe the gendered barriers or conditions that shape women's access into politics. Increasingly, a 6th C, that of cyberspace, is posing a barrier as women in public life have become targets for online abuse. The 4 R's of recruitment, resources, resistance and resilience sum up our interviewees' experiences of running for election. So while not all candidates run for political parties, the vast majority do. At the 2020 general election, 85% of women who contested election did so as party candidates. Political parties play a central role at each stage of candidacy, no more so than at the recruitment stage. While some women we interviewed approached a party in the first instance to inquire about running, the majority of women we spoke to were directly asked by a party to run for election. Besides political parties, encouragement and support from family and friends are also key recruiting factors. Without the support and backing, or without that support and backing from family and friends, many of the women we interviewed noted they simply could not have run. The motivation to run for political office stems from a desire to engender change on matters of a personal nature, such as a family health issue, a community issue, and or a wider societal and global issue. All interviewees in the study shared a belief that being in political office was key to enabling change. While very few of the women we interviewed described their families, as party people, many were socialized in families with a strong spirit of community involvement or volunteerism. This exposure to community activism from a young age fostered and nurtured an interest in local affairs and public engagement. For some, experiences of community work and volunteerism came at a later stage, spurred on by life experiences. These too acted as key mobilizing factors for their decision to seek election. Role model effects, or seeing other women in politics, inspired some women to run. However, for others, not seeing someone in politics who resembled them or represented their communities was the motivating factor to run. Capacity training and networking events offered by organisations such as Women for Election were significant for some in making a decision to run for election. Party resources to support candidates is important, whether this comes in the shape of providing party funding, organising personnel for campaign teams, offering capacity training and mentoring, covering the costs of such training, and providing practical canvas materials such as posters and leaflets. This is particularly vital for first-time candidates or candidates who may not have the personal funds and networks to draw upon. Women from marginalised communities face additional barriers as they may not have as extensive personal networks from which to draw practical and political supports. So party supports are even more important to these women. At the individual level, the issue of resources and practical supports is also pertinent across the various stages of political candidacy. Women note that having time to run and having access to funding are important factors, but without the support of family and friends, assistance with care responsibilities, job flexibility and personal networks, the pathway to political office would be a lot more difficult. Women speak about their concerns and worries about the effects of political life on their families, but spoke warmly of their partners, parents and children's encouragement of their political activism. The practical supports offered by family and friends are crucial, a point particularly noted by women with care responsibilities, whether this is childcare or caring for a family member with special needs. It is clear from the women's stories of the campaign trail that there is an expectation to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. So if one cannot self-fund or assemble their own campaign team or group of canvassers, the election campaign may struggle to be effective. Thus, personal networks are very important. And no matter how confident a candidate may feel about organising their own campaign, the advice from interviewees is it is very important to have another person act as a campaign manager. No one can do everything on their own. However, access to finance and personal networks is oftentimes gendered, but this is further mediated, as highlighted in research from Ireland and elsewhere, by socioeconomic status, ethnicity, disability, and migrant status. For example, migrant candidates noted that they could draw on family who are living overseas for practical support, such as assistance with care or with assistance with things such as fundraising events. In terms of campaign finances, election candidates are expected to largely independently fundraise and to cover the majority of costs incurred. The last general election for which we have full data on electoral returns is 2016, and in that general election, the average personal spend by women on their election campaigns was approximately €10,000. This is not an insignificant sum of money, given the average annual earnings in Ireland in 2019 were approximately 40,000. If we delve into this figure in more detail, we can see that the average earnings for part-time employees averaged €18,305. Women are more likely than men to work part-time hours as they balance paid employment with care responsibilities. And so in light of this fact, and on the basis of these figures, we can understand why funding is a gendered factor shaping women's access into politics. Furthermore, many women express self-doubt or a lack of self-confidence about putting themselves forward for candidate selection or election. Oftentimes, this sentiment stems from a political culture where women have been marginalised from politics. However, role model effects, i.e. seeing other women in politics, mentoring from women and men who are either currently serving in politics or previously served in office, and capacity training from organisations such as Women for Election have enabled women to overcome or at the very least manage these feelings. However, some of our interviewees experienced resistance on the campaign trail. This resistance can come in the shape of party resistance, such as undermining women's electoral chances by selection to unwinnable seats, and internal tribal politics. And I suppose internal tribal politics has always been a feature of party politics, but these can be heightened when new candidates are selected to run for political parties. Examples of resistance included some party members refusing to campaign for a new candidate and internal whispering campaigns. Aside from internal party politics, resistance and hostility, particularly on social media, was recalled. This can be sexist and personal in nature. Examples include querying who is minding your children to online abuse about appearance and personal relationships. Tom Fell, Emer Macaulay and Amy Blaney of NUI Galway reveal in their ongoing research, which they title Toxic Tweets, Female Politicians, Social Media and Misogyny, that some 96% of the current and former female politicians that they interviewed have received social media and or electronic messages that used foul language or made an inappropriate comment about their appearance and intelligence. Some 73% have been threatened with physical violence via social media, while 38% have been threatened with rape or sexual violence. Some 28% said that they have been verbally abused in public. Research by Lucina D'Ameco and Saskia Breschenmacher show that online abuse can be even more pronounced for female political leaders from racial, ethnic, religious, or other minority groups. While all politicians are prepared for the vagaries of a political campaign and being in public office, we must be careful not to minimise these as the mere cut and thrust of politics, as to do so will compound the problem and risk women opting out of politics, resulting in a disempowerment of women. But resilience is a shared characteristic of the women interviewed for this study, and their determination, can-do spirit, positivity and encouragement of other women is evident from the experiences shared in the study. They advise that while election campaigns are challenging, they do not regret running and advise other women to go for it. Canvassing and interacting with people is very enjoyable and campaigning is very sociable. Some spoke about interactions that they had with voters who thanked them about raising issues that affected them. The hours are long, and after the canvass, many a late night is spent responding to emails and following up on queries raised on the doorstep. While many interactions between candidates and voters were positive, as noted previously, difficult interactions are also recalled, particularly on social media. The support of family, friends, and the party is essential when such incidences arrive. One of our interviewees described the evening before the vote as a bit like Christmas Eve, where you can't really sleep and you're kind of excited to get up and go vote. For some, election day represented something of a break and they spent it with family, but for others, the campaign continued as they and their team put in calls and sent out social media and text messages, encouraging their supporters to turn out to vote, before then turning their attention to organising volunteers for tallying. All of the women recalled making their way to their polling centres or stations on election day to cast their ballot, and many did so with their families. For some first-time candidates, voting for themselves was quite an emotional moment. One interviewee remembers how she felt being a small part of Irish history, stating, "It was overwhelming, it really was, to go in and see myself on that ballot paper." While election day is often a day for family, the next day, count day, is very much about the party and the campaign team. It is clear from the women interviewed for this study that while they were the candidate on the ballot paper, their loss or victory was very much a collective one. As one woman recalled, "It's not just me, there's a team. I'm just the campaign front." There is much jubilation around an election win, but one woman summed up her loss as one felt not just by herself, but also by her team. She said, "I think people underestimate just how gutting it is to lose an election." Being elected is a huge honour, and women speak of it in humbling terms. They are hugely respectful of the faith that voters have entrusted in them and are privileged to serve and represent their constituents. There is little time to adjust to the reality of being an elected public representative, however. Unlike most other professions, there is very little, mostly none at all, protected time and space to induct into the role. Many of the training takes place on the job or informally by reaching out to party colleagues, present and former, who offer tips and advice. When it comes to the question of encouraging and facilitating more women to run for election, one woman we interviewed advised there is still too much emphasis on what the individual woman has to do and not enough emphasis on what the structural supports need to be. We agree. To not address structural matters will see a continuation of the overrepresentation of men in politics and a politics that lacks diversity of experiences. For the women who contest election as party candidates, political parties play a pivotal role across all the stages of their political candidacy, from the decision to run to getting on the ticket, and from contesting the election to getting elected. If political parties are serious about women's candidacy and seeing more women elected, a clear finding and message from this research is that those candidacies must be supported. Parties should provide feedback to interviewees about the candidate selection process and provide post-election debriefs for all candidates, particularly unsuccessful candidates. On the campaign trail, support women's candidacies through the provision of resources, particularly first-time candidates and those from underrepresented and marginalised communities. Furthermore, to enable a reasonable chance of election, new women must be selected to contest in constituencies where the party has a reasonable chance of winning a seat. However, incumbency is posing a challenge to this. An incumbent is someone who already holds a seat and is seeking re-election. Of the 138 incumbent TDs who sought re-election in last year's general election, 107 or 77.5% were men, posing a particular challenge for the emergence of new women candidates. At election time, political parties seek to maximise the vote, and in Ireland, where personalism is such a strong feature of the political culture, political parties will tend to look at the tried and tested incumbent, whose name recognition and past record in office the party hopes will boost its vote. One way of addressing this challenge of incumbency is to extend legislative gender quotas to local elections. Doing so will increase the number of women contesting and winning local elections. Furthermore, if those women decide to put their names forward for a general election, their experience of local politics and record in office will enhance their profile and name recognition amongst voters, thus enhancing their selection and election prospects in a general election. Childcare supports, or the lack thereof, were highlighted frequently by the women we spoke to. Paid maternity leave for politicians should be introduced, and similar to moves underway in other jurisdictions, campaign finance rules should be reviewed with a view to accommodate the inclusion of additional childcare costs incurred during the course of a campaign as part of the recorded campaign expenditure. In conclusion, political scientists Merrill Kenny and Jennifer Piscopo argue that exhorting women to simply lean in cannot solve the problem of men's overrepresentation in politics. There is a need to understand and recognise the gendered dynamics shaping women's candidate emergence, their experiences of the campaign trail, and their experiences of political office. These gendered dynamics include individual, institutional, and contextual factors, some of which are highlighted in this report. Recent years have witnessed increasing gender balance in elected office in Ireland, largely due to the legal gender quota for Dáil elections and its spillover effects. However, there is still a long road to travel before gender parity is the norm. Following the February 2020 general election, the proportion of women TDs in Dáil Éireann stands at 22.5%, while women's political representation in local government is 25.5%. It is 40% in Seána D'éireann and 38.5% among the 13 Irish MEPs. At the cabinet table, just 4 of the 15 ministers are women, and as highlighted recently by Aoife Moore of the Irish Examiner, just 40% of the cabinet, government cabinet committees do not include any women. Furthermore, the Irish Immigrant Council has highlighted that less than 1% of those elected in the 2019 local elections are from a migrant background, while in July 2020, Eileen Flynn became the first woman from the traveller community to become a member of the Oireachtas when she was appointed to the Seanad. Attaining gender parity and diversity in Irish politics and in political decision making is therefore an ongoing process, which demands a continuing focus and resources to achieve it. While election campaigns and life as a public representative is rigorous and hectic, marked with highs and lows, encouragingly, the vast majority of the women we interviewed would do it all again and encourage other women to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And I suppose really you've given us thank you, Fiona. I suppose really you've given us a snapshot there of the report and the recommendations and obviously the methodology and how you gained such an insight into the women that have been kind enough to share their experiences with you. I mean, I think for anyone who gets an opportunity to read the report or the summary, it really highlights that we're looking here at a combination of historical factors, primarily systemic factors that are causing the issues in terms of the lack of gender balance, and a lot of individual and personal issues that women need to, I suppose, work through as themselves within that system. So I think the value of the research is it brings all of those things together, and for us, it gives us really a roadmap going forward of the areas we need to highlight as an organisation, as Women for Election, to seek to bring about that change in a very practical way. We're not just an advocacy group, we're here to make change happen from a very practical way, and our combination of the services that we offer to women and the supports as they come through the system, allied to those systemic changes, we believe will make real change happen. So thank you, Fiona, and thank you to Lisa Keenan for putting it all together for us and really giving us a very valuable document to wield as we move forward in our mission to see more women elected. So one of them, I suppose, for me, the most interesting aspects of the report was the individual voices that we heard through the research. We can hear the voices, we can almost hear the accents, we can really hear those women as they begin to say things that you could imagine sitting next to somebody hearing in a conversation. So we'd love to explore that further now with 4 female politicians who we're delighted to be joined by. We're going to spend the next half an hour or so just teasing through some of the questions that may, I suppose, come up in relation to what the research has shown us. 2 of the participants that we're going to talk to today have actually participated in the research. Maria Walsh, who's MEP, Fine Gael MEP. Maria has been a huge supporter of Women for Election, and she has credited our Inspire programme as being perhaps the motivation that ultimately shoved her over the edge and got her to put her hand up and say she was going to run. She's been an MEP since July in 2019 for Midlands Northwest constituency, and we're delighted that Maria can join us. I'm also joined by Councillor Cllr Byrne of the Green Party. Again, Claire has been at many of our events, and in fact has spoken at many of our events, and she has represented South East Inner City Dublin since 2014. Councillor Seána Rodaigh of the Labour Party, who was elected to Fingal County Council in 2019, and again she's been very much at our events and taking part in the services that we offer. And finally, Thoiba Ahmed, who was a local election candidate in Letterkenny, an independent candidate. She ran in 2019 local elections. She wasn't successful at that time, but I know she's really pushing to go again, and really good to see that level of resilience that we've talked about. So I'm going to try and bring everybody in if I can over the next half an hour or so with some questions, and we might start, Thoiba, with you. If you want to stick on your microphone there so we can hear you. I suppose one of the things that many people looking at the whole political sphere will ask themselves, what is the motivation that pushes people to actually put their hand up and say, I'm thinking of running, I'm thinking of getting involved. For you, what was that key motivation to run?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you all today to share my experience. I came to Ireland by that time about 4 years, and I stepped forward to link my education in Sudan to my education in Ireland. And I did some of them, and I volunteer with Donegal Intercultural Platform and Donegal Volunteer Center. After 3 years from my voluntary as a community worker, and I was looking, for the positive social change, and I always trying to make myself a peace bridge, to build the peace bridge between communities. After 3 years, the Immigrant Council sent to us a visitor, and he told us that we have the right to vote and we have the right to stand. And I make up my mind since that minute to make myself a living proof and to be a role model, maybe as a teacher for the generation that might come. So it was the community work. The minute that I heard I have the right to stand, I just decided from that moment.
Okay, so it was understanding that you had a right to run that was one of the motivations. I suppose that's something that, many of us believe we have a right to run, but there's not that many of us are motivated to act on it. So really you grabbed it with both hands and said, I'm going to do it.
It's not only I want to practice my right. I just want the positive social change. As a community worker, I want to do something. I want to be the living proof for it.
Okay, thank you, Thoiba. Maria, you've had a sort of varied career leading up to your launch into politics, and you tried a number of different career routes, I suppose. What was it about politics that gave you the impetus to say, I'm really going to go for it?
Yeah, thanks, Alison, and delighted to be here. Fiona and team, a body of work that you must have sieved through, and I was delighted to add my voice into it, and just really honoured and delighted to be here and see so many men and women on the participants link, because that just shows diversity at its core. For me, Alison, to your point, to your question, it really was the fact that I didn't see a voice represent all the different aspects of me, and I didn't grow up in party politics. I grew up like many households that were very organized in the community and were very volunteer led, and post referendums that instrumentally changed my living in Ireland through marriage equality and the repeal of the eighth. It was interesting to me how questions, the referendum seemed very trivial, trendy and sexy, and rightly they should, but yet the amount of people my age were like, well, that's it, that's my politics done and dusted with, and my engagement in politics, where in actual fact, if we were to break down the cycle, it's not just through referendums, it's also through people who put their hands up and get involved at local, national and European, as well as NGO groups, and that's how you break the systemic vicious cycle that we often find ourselves in. And I was really fascinated by the disconnect, which then led me to Women for Election, and I gifted myself one day. I'm a living example of you put yourself into a room and you open your brain and see what could stick and what didn't, and I was really enamored by actually Councillor Byrne was one of the speakers at that event, talking about her own experience and the fact that even at the table, there's still a lot of changes and you know, possibilities, but if you're not at the table, nothing changes. So for me, that just kind of spearheaded my boldness of putting my hand up. But and I know we'll get to it, but just in case, I just want to say, like, for women, and what I think post-COVID could really gift us as a gender is, you know, often the women I speak to is like one local issue or one issue that they want to change on the ground, but that has a ripple effect throughout the country. So if it's happening in one community, it's more than likely happening in another. And I think we have to see beyond just that one local community issue and really be brave within ourselves and force the hand of political parties and those that representatives like myself to start really engaging from the get-go. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Maria. I'll bring you in now, Councillor Cllr Byrne. You've been mentioned there in dispatches as being one of the sources of inspiration for seeing Maria proceed to the heights of being an MEP. And I know you were
very honoured. Thanks, Maria.
And I know you were there that day, and obviously your photograph is also featured in the report behind the podium as you gave that address to the many people who were there. So I suppose that feeling of being a role model, you know, you're in politics, you're obviously in the public sphere. Do you see women politicians as having a role in this in terms of bringing more women through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's inevitable if women see more women involved in politics, that they're more likely to get involved. And that's why organizations like Women for Election and See Her Elected and that are hugely important. Because look, it's we can't get around the fact that generally, and congratulations on the report, by the way, and the research. It's really interesting, and I look forward to reading it in more detail, and the common themes that have come up as well. But I think it's no secret that women generally need a lot more encouragement and a lot more support if they're to put themselves forward into any role that's such a public-facing role. and quite a high risk role in many ways as well. I mean, there's lots of risks attached. I mean, you referenced in the report there, you know, in relation to online abuse or offline abuse, and also it's not a particularly secure job, so you're making a lot of sacrifices for something that doesn't really guarantee you a long-term career necessarily, and you know, so but yeah, I mean, I think like I always say, strong women lift each other up, and I think that's really, it's why it's so important that women support other women in this process and encourage other women in your own party, outside your party, independence, and kind of, you know, take away the competitiveness of it and just kind of help each other out through the process. And I think that, in addition to the many structural issues that we still need to be addressed, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's one of the core things that we need to get more women involved in politics.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Seána, just to, I suppose, bring you in here, you were elected to the Fine Gael Council in 2019 as a first-time candidate. So I suppose what was it in terms of your inspiration that led you to think I should get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Alison, and congratulations to Drs. Buckley and Keenan on the report. I would describe myself as an accidental politician, to be honest. I never would have seen myself in this arena. I didn't come from a political background. I would have been very involved in the community again around mental health supports and trying to work in that sphere. So I was approached, and as Dr. Buckley outlined, a lot of women are asked to run, and I was really surprised. But the way I describe it is, when I was asked would I consider running, I felt as if I had been passed the ball, and I really didn't want to catch this ball, but I knew that I kind of had to, and if I didn't, that it would be more than likely a man who was catching it instead. So after talking to a good few female councillors, I decided I was going to get involved and step into the arena. And I really don't regret it for a minute, but the training I got, the inspired training I got with Women for Election, was absolutely pivotal in giving me confidence. And it's amazing the ripple effect that has had now. So even now, like, we had a local branch meeting last week, and I asked particular women if they would step into roles of leadership within the branch, which they wouldn't have before. So we now have an all-female senior leadership branch in one of the branches near us. So things like that they're then feeding into policy, into party policy, and it's really, I think, as Claire outlined as well, women supporting women. But I was really heartened to hear Minister Burke and his energy and his commitment, because it's going to involve us all, and it's going to involve structural changes that, like, if out of 10 chairs around the table, 8 of them, there are men sitting at 8 of them, we're going to have to look at ways that a couple of the men step back, and they're not going to do that easily. If it's, you know, we know how hard it is getting a ticket. So having kind of a woman in a constituency, maybe that, you know, they're not going to get elected, but it fulfills something, to, you know, so you can secure your funding or whatever it is. All of those things, as Dr. Buckley said, it's a process. But yeah, it's really heartening to hear the results of this research, and that there's a timeline to it. I loved that as well, that it's not going to kind of go, there's, you know, that's great to know that, but nothing will happen. So yeah.
Okay, you mentioned party structures and party systems there, Seána, and I suppose it's, you know, it's a function across the entire political spectrum. It's probably an issue that may be more relevant for established parties, and I suppose that systemic change that we need to see in the system is a you know, a nettle that needs to be grasped. I mean, what do you think, Maria? I'll ask you, I suppose, as a representative of one of the more established parties, what do you think the parties can do in practical terms, to begin to change the systems?
Yeah, I mean, in practical terms, it's I mean, it's our General Secretary, along with board, along with every representative in the party structure, constantly understanding and educating ourselves on what the impact of gender and diversity has on our politics. So for me, and I'm sure Minister Burke also feels the same, like every time, you know, my team often scratch their head saying, will you stop saying this? But every time I go to a school or I meet a business, be it online or offline, pre-COVID. It was a case of like, how can I support you in an avenue to get involved in the political landscape, and maybe not necessarily as a candidate, but as a support system for that candidate. And for me, right gender is one thing, but we also have to look at colour, creed, the length people have stayed in this country or lived in this country, and really opening up the channels, because we are a diverse pro-European country in many ways. And if we are that, then we have to reflect that. So a lot of the case in terms of the nuts and bolts is strategy meetings, making sure every PP member right down the chain from local to European is on the one hymn sheet that we constantly need to be looking for new people coming in. And much to Seána's point in terms of what does the room look like, you know, pre-COVID or in the virtual world, you know, if you're only seeing similar faces or faces you've seen for generations, that's wonderful. That holds our traditional values and our legacy and shares the info for new people coming through, but you ultimately need new breath coming in. And if you don't have that, then you become stagnant, and then nothing changes. So for me, I remember speaking to Taoiseach Leo Varadkar after a president's dinner, right after I got elected, I think it was in 2019. And he very kindly asked me to give a few words. And I pointed out the fact that I had welcomed various members from different networks to the table, because that room, branch meetings, constituency meetings, party-led meetings needs to change. And if you don't invite people in, you know, we can't expect people, it's like the old branch manager, you can't expect people to come in the door and set up stuff new if they're not welcomed, if they're not met at a 50-50 ratio. So for me, it's a case of we need the language, and we need the training around that. We need to have the hard conversations that you know, competition is not a bad thing as long as it's fair, and that honest conversation has to happen. And we need to ultimately begin to start changing rooms is fundamentally from my perspective. And maybe Minister Burke has more points on it. But for me, I think reports like this begin a new channel. But if we leave it till late 2023 to get our ducks in a row, then as individuals and as a movement and as ultimately as a political party, we've wasted time.
Okay, thank you for that, Marie. Also, just I suppose moving forward in terms of the experience of running for election, I'm sure she won't mind me pointing out that Thoiba was close, but didn't in fact achieve a seat in the last election. But Thoiba, what did you learn from the process, do you think? What are the most important things that you learned from going through that process of putting your hand up, getting your name on the ballot, canvassing and being out and in the community? And what has that informed in terms of your future plans for perhaps running again?
That makes me more confident for the next time, because I have the learning, I have the experience, and also I have widened my network. I have the relationships, and the canvassing was so delightful experience, because the inclusion and acceptance is the heart of what I do at the doorstep with the people on the human level. Also, I have my team, and it is very diverse, you know, Polish, German, Kurdish, Syrian, Egyptian. It was a festival of diversity continued for 2 months. And I'm really delighted because I could say that it is friendship, and I want to thank them from here. Also, I made history by being the first African Arab Muslim woman to run in County Donegal. And I consider that is, you know, really big change from my perspective as a community worker.
And are you going to run again, Thoiba, at this stage? I know it's early to ask, but are you ready for the next one?
I know how to prepare myself. You know, last time I ran with only 30 posters. I will prepare for that. I canvassed and leaflet only 4,000 houses because I couldn't send them through the post or a company. So I need to look for fund or to save money myself. So I'll be more prepared for that, and I will create my team earlier, doing my plans earlier. I just got the experience after I did that, you know.
Okay, thank you, Thoiba. Coming on to you, Cllr, I mean, you've been a councillor now since 2014. So I suppose those learnings, you know, you've been through a number of elections, hopefully running for another one, but what are the things you learn along the way in terms of being in the midst of those campaigns, and what do you bring forward for the next time? Is there anything that strikes you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as well, it was kind of, you know, I had run a few of Eamon Ryan's campaigns before I did it for myself, but it's very different. I mean, I was a little bit of an accidental politician as well in lots of ways. And so when I was asked to run in 2014, and it was very, very, very short 6-week campaign, which was great. And I was like, yeah, no, I can do this. I've done this Raymond. And then I got on my first canvas. I was like, I don't need a campaign manager. I'm just going to do it for myself. And I got on my first canvas and literally just froze in the street and went, oh no, I actually need help. So get a campaign manager is definitely the number one piece of advice that I would have. Yeah, I mean, look, every election is different. You know, for me in 2014, it was a very short, sharp campaign. At the time, I was single, so I didn't have to think about anyone else. I could go canvassing every night. I could take time off work. It was all fine. By 2019, I had a 3-year-old. I had a partner to consider. I had 3 jobs. 3 part-time jobs, but still 3 jobs, and I was also 7 months pregnant. So that was quite a different experience then in 2019. But the fundamentals are still there. It's like what Thoiba was saying, and everyone else is saying, like, you have to have, you know, I mean, having a party, I think, and I have huge respect for independent people who run without a party. And I remember, Maria, you asking me at that event back in 2019, you know, what about being an independent versus a party? And for me, the party, just having that, you know, the level of support from your members is huge, and the support from your party team in terms of like just assets for communications and, you know, getting lines on things that might come up in media, all of that, like, that's like crucially important. But it will still always come down to friends and family as well, you know. And that was, and now certainly for me in 2014, it was a real novelty, and all my friends were coming out for me. By the time 2019 came around, they were kind of like, yeah, you're grand, I don't think you really need us, you know. And you know, I guess, you know, the difference in the two was I had more time to plan and prepare, and also I had, you know, achievements. It was less promising about what I was going to do and more about what I had done, and please judge me on my record at this stage. And it was probably a slightly more organized campaign in lots of ways, which helped. So next time round, who knows? You know, we were very much on the top of a green wave in 2019. I'm not sure we'll be there in 2024, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, yeah, planning is hugely important. Money is also really important, and just getting a really, really good team around you to help you with those aspects. It's very hard to plan fundraisers on your own. It's very hard to ask people for money yourself as well. I have found. Like, technology has come on a long way. Like, certainly in 2019 for me, because I was heavily pregnant, having a big sort of boozy fundraiser event wasn't really an option yet. You know, now you can kind of, you know, I did a fundraiser through Rally Up with really good prizes, and kind of raised the same amount of money as I had done in 2014 when I had a really fun party, you know. And so, like, technology has certainly helped in that sense, but you do need people to help you on all of those aspects. And, you know, like, you know, you might be the candidate, but you're only the measure of the team that you have behind you at any stage. So start asking people now would be my advice if you're looking to run in any upcoming elections.
Yeah, Pat Montague, one of our trainers on our Inspire program, actually brought that up during a recent training session, saying that, you know, you don't start your campaign in the 6 weeks prior to the election. You actually start in 3 years in advance, and you harvest. Well,
I did it in 2014 and it worked for me, but I wouldn't recommend.
You were an exception perhaps to that, Cllr. Yeah. Most people would start a bit earlier, and fair play to you for delivering the seat on such a short campaign.
we've talked a bit about the motivation for getting involved, and we've talked about the campaign itself. Seána, can I ask you, having been a successful candidate and actually taking on the role of councillor, really your insights to the role when you got there versus what you expected, and you know, what are the aspects that really appeal to you of being a councillor?
Yeah, well, to be honest, Alison, when I was asked to run, I had no idea what a local councillor did, because I'd never had any need to contact a councillor, or I would have voted in the local elections, but that was about as much as I did. So before I made my decision, I met with a few female councillors in Dublin City Council just to get an idea of what the role entailed. And having met them, then I kind of I decided I'd go for it. And the fact that it's termed as being part-time is absolutely, it's ludicrous, but you still have to work another job. So that is something that I really, really wish could change. And also I think a lot more women may get involved in it if they were to do so. So it was a really steep learning curve. The first year, you know, you really feel a little bit overwhelmed, but for me, boundaries were such a big thing. But, you know, just saying to yourself, look, this is a part-time role. It's paid a part-time role, but it's not a part-time role. But I really had to learn to just say, between these hours, that's when I'm doing my council work. And then I have to do my other work, but I still want to have a life as well. And I think the suggestion in the report, the recommendation of extending the gender quota legislation to local politics, to local governments, is a really badly needed one. That you know, that would ensure even women going forward that they're recognised more, and that they have experience in the legislative side as well as the advocacy role as well. But I know you touched on cyber, you know, that whole cyberspace, and that is another barrier, another C, the 6th C. And that is something I have to say that I wasn't prepared for initially, that when you put yourself out there, and I would consider myself to be quite, you know, I would consider myself to be strong enough and you know, not really take things to heart badly. But when you start getting abuse online, you know, serious abuse online from people who would be liking your page if you're talking about something else, it is hard to take. And you know, people have to be prepared for that as well, as awful as it is. But we really need to start tackling that and looking at it, because if you go into it not expecting that this might happen, it's, you know, it can be very damaging, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's an area that comes up regularly. It's in the report. It's very much in the mainstream in terms of discussion around this area. So it's great to see it finally, you know, being acknowledged. And I think there appears to be a view that we need to do something. I think the question is, what do we need to do at a society level, again, at that systemic level, whether it's with the providers of the platforms, what can we do? Maria, you've obviously been involved in this area for some years now. What are you seeing in terms of the potential possibilities of mitigating what's happening out there? How do we get a hold of it? How do we begin to influence it?
Yeah, well, closer to home, within our own selves, within our own parties, I think there is a great space for training or talking to what abuse online can, in a horrible sense, gift us, as in, can you pull away all the nonsense and the personal attacks? Because unfortunately for women, it's predominantly personal. So, you know, I would have got size, shape, dress code, my sexuality. Now, I'm fortunate that in some ways I would have come out as, you know, the gay Rose of Tralee. So I already welcomed a little bit of abuse from 2014 as the International Rose. So, but there was a significant change. Like, I remember when I officially launched with Fine Gael as an MEP candidate, within an hour, the temperament and the tone online had changed for me. And I was curious as to why and how, because I was the same person 1 hour prior. It was just the fact that I had an established party and was a member of them, and I was going to run. In terms of, I mean, I work with Emer Higgins, deputy within the party, quite closely on this and keeping an eye, even Regina Doherty too, just figuring out how do we work with the social media platforms, both on mainland Europe as well as at home in Ireland, and then understanding and calling out in in a democratic way what is right and what is wrong, and ultimately then how do we train ourselves as women to get ready for it, to reply to it if it needs replying, or ignore if it needs ignoring, because there's a couple of different ways to do that. And unfortunately, as others had said, and as it was just shared, like, we're all nodding our head to say absolutely the abuse was rife, and that was just on my orientation or size, shape, and my physical, and the fact that I was I experienced homophobic slurs, but I certainly didn't experience racist homophobic slurs. So we need to also protect for future candidates coming through on what diversity means. And you do that, like, as I said, it comes down to training within ourselves. It comes down to training within our parties, working with groups like you guys, Alison and Caitriona, in terms of like, how can we support women better so that when they do type, should I run for politics, it's not cyber abuse they see first, and then ultimately work with stakeholders, because not all, from COVID, I think we've experienced technology is a wonderful thing to have in our lives. I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but my mental health would be down the swally if I didn't have some sort of engagement with someone, and digital space allows us to do that. It's just, how do you work with the stakeholders? How do you ensure that they have an equality officer within their, a number of them actually, within their platform spaces, to make sure that if we do have issues that we call that out, and we're not talking to a robot on the screen, we're actually talking to CEOs and managing directors, and maybe that is a cross-organization opportunity where Women for Election are working with the likes of Facebook and Twitter in particular, because that's where a lot of the horrible information and the disinformation and the nonsense happens. But we're seeing a rise of it, unfortunately, definitely on mainland Europe. So we need to make sure, as equally minded as Irish folks or people living in Ireland, that we're protecting each other and our mental health within that. But I think this could be a whole debate in itself. And I'm delighted for Fiona that this had come up from people engaging, because, as I said, ultimately we need to figure out a solve within our, as a group, versus just individual parties or individuals just calling it out. It has to be a unified approach.
Thank you, Maria, for that. And I suppose, you've mentioned the concept of support. I'm certainly feeling a lot of support on this call among the four politicians that we've got here. So that feeling of collegiality, that feeling of actually working together is very strong, I think, across the political spectrum in relation to female politicians. But what other supports, Thoiba, would you like to see in place for women, particularly going forward for election, both women in general, but particularly in the diversity space, where we need to see more women from across all communities coming forward? What supports would you like to see in place?
I will talk about my experience about the discrimination. I got some kind of that, and the most frustrating one is from public services. So I wish to see some improvement, or like a system of reporting or all of that. I also recently studied a hate speech course, which was sponsored by Facebook and Google. So I think we need legislation, in this regard. And I strongly, encourage the people to keep going to apply the gender quota. It is fair. And I am really delighted to hear that it is mentioned on the local level, because that is a start. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, Thoiba, thank you. On that question of the gender quota at local level, Claire, can I bring you in on that? Again, you've been through two councils now. What difference do you think that would make at local level?
I think it would make a huge difference. I think it would definitely put more impetus on parties to ensure that we are, they're actively encouraging more. Thankfully, my own party is really good at that, but not all parties are. And it would put the impetus on parties to really actively go after women and encourage them to run. But again, ensuring that, from from a national and local level that we have proper supports in place, and that the parties also have proper supports in place. But I don't think we can apply a gender quota without those structural changes that we referenced. Things like the need for maternity leave for women. I mean, I was after both my children, I was back in the chamber after 2 weeks. I had to fight after I had my first child to even be allowed to bring my child into meetings as a breastfeeding mother. These are all the things that need to be addressed very, very urgently. My colleague, Councillor Darcy Lonergan, has set up an official women's committee, and I know other councils have done as well at Dublin City Council, and it's a lot of work being done in that space by that committee and other committees around the country as well. Because we have to make, the reality is we have to make it more appealing for women. It has to be more appealing financially. It has to be more appealing if you have a family or you want to have a family, that it's more family friendly. Better childcare, or just better money so you can afford childcare. All of those things. And Seána was saying, more understanding of the realities of the job as well. I mean, I don't think we get briefed enough. Other than talking to other people who are in it, like I don't think women get briefed enough about the actual reality of the position and the impacts that it can have on you. And certainly in this day and age as well, that sort of, I love that resilience came up as a common theme in the report. But it's a different type of resilience that you need these days, as both Marie and Thoiba have said. It's like, we got really good resilience training a few weeks ago through Dublin City Council. Not many people showed up for it, but I found it hugely beneficial. I think just particularly at the moment, as well as we're in the middle of COVID and we're really living in an online world, and it's very hard to escape it. And whereas I can normally brush things off, and to be fair, I don't get that much crap online, thankfully, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. But I have still found myself, lying in bed awake at night, like crafting drunken text to an ex or something, that kind of thing, where you're just like, oh, this is what I'm going to say, and then don't press send, sleep on it, and all of that.
Don't send that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Just wait till tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and so, I think there's a lot of that going on. So certainly that's sort of the resilience training and the resilience piece. While women are very, very resilient, I definitely think there needs to be a little bit more support for that, and how to protect yourself from the abuse that you get just by being a woman. So I think they have to go hand in hand. I don't think there's any point in us applying gender quotas at a local level if we're not prepared to actually actively support women at a local level.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Thoiba, do you have your hand up there? Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just forget to mention that we have to look at it from intersectional perspective, for different background and for the diversity itself. I want to emphasize the registration process. It's really hard. It's really difficult. It was a huge, issue for us, taking our energy and time, because most of the young people and immigrants, they didn't know that they have the right to vote, and they didn't know they have the right, to stand. I suggest that I think the media, the TV, the radio, will be so beneficial, or maybe if there is a clinic for registration or something like that, I believe it will bring some kind of change.
Okay, thank you, Thoiba. And I'm sure everybody would echo that that desire to see more people registering to vote and getting involved in the whole political process. We've a relatively healthy democracy in this country, and I think that will only be continued if we engage people in the process at all levels. I'm going to finish. I suppose one of the main conclusions of the report, which from our perspective at Women for Election was very affirming, and we were very pleased to see it, is this feeling among the respondents to the research of the advice they would give to other women coming to them and saying, I'm thinking of getting involved, what do you think? certainly the respondents to the research seem very positive in that area. I'd just like to ask each of you, what would your advice be if somebody approached you and said, I'm considering it, I'm thinking of it, I'm not sure what to do? Seána, you were that person going to somebody else some time ago and saying, I'm thinking about it. What would your advice be now to any woman coming to you and asking?
Okay, so my advice would be, take a look around. As Maria said, look at the rooms where decisions are being made and ask yourself, are you prepared to say to your daughters and your nieces and for generations that you're going to be waiting another 100 years for that to change? So it's not easy. It absolutely is not easy, but until we step into the arena, and an arena it is, we're going to be waiting. Change will come about at a much slower rate. So it's hard, but it's necessary, and future generations will thank us for it the way we thanked women in the past who've managed to achieve so many things that have been achieved for women so far. So that would be my advice. Get into the arena.
So go for it. Yeah. Cllr, what about yourself? What will be your words of wisdom? Well, you've already inspired an MEP, so inspire more out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely go for it. I mean, there is nothing but good to come from having more women making decisions and representing other women. Nobody gets women's issues more than other women. We're doers, we're more empathetic, we're more conscientious, we're more likely to fight for other women's rights. And we're also really good multitaskers, and that's, a really important skill to have in the job as well. But also, it's hugely rewarding, the whole experience, even if you don't win, the whole experience of, being involved in a campaign and knocking on the doors, and as much as for me, I know I've said this multiple times before, it's like you'd start the evening dreading a canvas, and by the end of it, you come out on a high, because you've just met so many people that you would never have the opportunity to meet on a day-to-day basis, with from all ends of the spectrum, from all walks of life, and and even if it's just a few minutes chat and understanding their role in Ireland, and their little insight into their life, and what their needs are, and you can't ever put a price on that. There's nothing else that'll kind of give you. I know people who work in the community and do have a lot of that, but for me, that's the piece that is so worth embarking on the journey. And if you get elected, be prepared to get elected, because you might, and just to do it, just to go for it if you're in any way inclined. I think it's just overall a really, really rewarding experience, and ultimately, you need to be the change you want to see. So
okay,
yeah.
Cllr, thanks for that. And Thoiba, your words to anyone who's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, what do you think? Should I run?
I believe that women can represent women, in a good way, because they can represent all the society, the youth, the children, they can be women, and I will encourage them. It doesn't need an exact education or knowledge. If you can manage your life, your house, your children, your everything, you'll be fine later on to look at the politics and campaign and all of that stuff in the council. So just be prepared, be confident, and you can be the change.
Thank you, Thoiba. And Maria, I'll leave the final words to you on words of advice. You've made it to the top of the tree in terms of an MEP. So what's your advice?
You're very kind in saying, but far from the top. Every day is a learning day. I often say I either feel I got a high five or kick in the derriere, depending on what's going on in the day. But I mean, I think we all are inspired by the Jacindas of New Zealand and the AOCs of New York, but we actually have a plethora of them on the island of Ireland. And ultimately, our networks are vast. You know, I think a lot of women don't think they can see themselves in the role, but yet they're a part of organizations, charities, speak to other parents if they're dropping their kids off or daycare, and would be involved in the community. And it's those people that we need in order to change the impact that the community makes on our lives. And if we don't do that, if we don't want to perhaps be the candidate on the campaign poster, there is a hell of a lot of room for the kitchen table for women who just need to inspire other women to run. And it's not just the candidate that wins the election, as Cllr had said earlier. It is your campaign manager or your ballsy friend that's going to walk up to the door that you know someone's going to shout at you and be able to support you through that. It is the person who's able to type a mile a minute and put a tweet up for you and saying, you know, Maria's going to be here in an hour, who's around to support. Like, it is those skill sets, and everybody has career capital, every single person. And if we don't lean into it, stand up for it, then ultimately we're going to be here, Alison, and unfortunately Dr. Fiona Buckley, you're going to be writing the same report in 5 years' time, and I for hell don't want that. So I think in case of gender and diversity, inclusion and belonging, when it comes to women in politics, I know my remit is the likes that regardless of what political group you may align to, we need you involved, because the stronger coalitions, the stronger cross-party participation, the rooms that we need changing is only going to get strong when we look at this and tackle it together in the solidarity and the unity that we need. So ultimately, yeah, reach out. I threw my email and my social media handles in. Like, I don't care what group you're from, just ask the questions if you have, and bit by bit we begin to change the landscape and the makeup that is our politics. And if you, I get, my final words is, and I promise Alison I'll stop talking, my greatest frustration and another catalyst that made me lean into politics was the fact that armchair activism only gets you into another sitting room, doesn't get you around the decision-making table. So you got to get up off the armchair and start making action.
Okay, we might just have to patent that slogan, Maria, and we might have to steal it. But thank you so much, and thank you to all of the participants on our panel today, Maria, Thoiba, Cllr, and Seána. I think more than anything, you've shown us that any woman thinking of running has an already made support network there from her. I mean, the collegiality and the support that we've seen from your contributions is a fantastic signpost of what women will achieve and will experience when they achieve actually getting into politics. We're also delighted that the Minister has stayed with us for the entire session. Minister, I hope you've heard some insights there that will help you in your really important work to support getting more women into politics. We're with you every step of the way. We know you're with us, and we look forward to your continued support. And thank you to Fiona for really putting together a report that just amplifies the real voices in this issue. We've seen the statistics. We're horrified by the statistics. We continue to be horrified by the statistics, but we're very hopeful for the real voices that are coming through, and to see that unanimity of women saying, go for it. Make the decision, jump on board, don't be an armchair activist, be at the decision-making table. So thank you all for joining us. We look forward to our next events as they come through. We're continually running training events, support events for women. Take a look at the website and see our calendar, and we look forward to as many as possible of you coming through, getting on the ticket and actually putting your hand up and say, we are going to change Ireland together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think what is mentioned today is real solidarity, you know, by the minister, by Women for Election, by everyone. It's really encouraging. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
And thank you, Caitriona and Cllr, for your help in putting this together, and to Kieran, obviously, who was involved at the beginning. Great to see a report finally published, and let's put the report to work. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.